The moment he stepped into the kitchen, everything he believed about people, status, and intelligence started to fall apart without warning. A billionaire known for building companies that shaped industries stood still as his eyes landed on something he never expected to see in a place like this. Between the noise of clattering plates, rushing staff, and the heat of a busy kitchen, a young waitress sat quietly in the corner with a laptop open, completely absorbed in lines of code. No one around her seemed surprised. That was the most disturbing part. He didn't move at first. Crowd. It felt unreal, like a scene that didn't belong in his world. She wasn't checking orders or rushing tables. She wasn't speaking to customers. She was building something invisible, something powerful, something that didn't match her uniform or her surroundings. Her focus was so deep it almost shut out everything else. Even the chaos around her seemed to lose against her silence. One of the kitchen workers passed by and barely even looked at her. That detail stayed with him longer than expected. How could something so unusual feel so normal to everyone else? He finally stepped forward, breaking the distance between curiosity and reality. The sound of his shoes on the floor made her pause. Slowly, she lifted her eyes from the screen, not startled, not nervous, just calm, as if she had already decided this moment would come one day. Before he could even ask anything, she spoke softly. "I'm not stealing anything," she said, her voice steady. If you're worried about the Wi-Fi, I asked for permission. It wasn't defensive, it wasn't emotional. It was factual, controlled, almost rehearsed from experience. Frowned slightly, not because of what she said but because of how she said it. There was no fear in her tone, only quiet certainty. "You're coding here?" he asked, still trying to make sense of the contradiction in front of him. She nodded once and turned her screen slightly as if she didn't mind being seen anymore. Lines of code filled the display, structured, clean, complex, not something casual, not something accidental. "I don't have time outside of work," she said, "so I use the time I get." That sentence hit differently than anything he expected. Not dramatic, not emotional, just real. In a way that didn't need explanation. He looked around the kitchen again. People were still moving, shouting, working. He stopped, nobody cared. And yet, right in the middle of it, she was building something that required focus most people couldn't maintain even in silence. "What are you building?" he asked after a pause. She hesitated for the first time. Not because she didn't know the answer, but because she wasn't used to being asked. "Something that might change how people like me get seen," she said finally. That answer should have sounded ambitious, maybe even unrealistic, but coming from her it didn't feel like a dream, it felt like something already in progress. The billionaire leaned slightly closer, studying her screen again. The code wasn't random, it wasn't basic learning practice. It was structured like something real, something with purpose. "Do you study computer science?" he asked. A small, almost invisible smile crossed her face, but it didn't carry pride, it carried history. "I used to want to," she replied. "But life doesn't always let you follow plans, sometimes you follow survival instead." There was a pause after that, not empty, full. For the first time in years, he didn't think about profit margins or market strategies. He didn't think about acquisitions or expansion. He was looking at a problem he had never included in any boardroom discussion: talent that never gets the chance to be seen. She closed her laptop slightly, not out of discomfort, but out of habit, like she had already said enough for one conversation. Then she stood up, adjusting her apron, preparing to return to work as if nothing unusual had happened. But something had already shifted, because the billionaire wasn't looking at a waitress anymore. He was looking at a question he didn't yet know how to answer. The kitchen was still loud, still fast, still overflowing with orders and pressure. But for the billionaire, something had changed in the way he experienced it now. It was no longer just a place of service and movement. It had become a place where something unexpected was quietly growing in the background. Every time his eyes moved across the room, they eventually found her again, as if his attention had learned where to return without permission. She was back to work now, moving between tables, balancing trays, responding to customers with the same calm professionalism as everyone else. Nothing about her appearance suggested what he had seen earlier, and that contrast made it harder to forget. A few minutes ago, she was writing code that looked like it belonged in a high-level tech company. Now she was simply another waitress in a busy kitchen. He tried to focus on what he had come here for originally, but his mind kept pulling him back to her. Not because of what she did, but because of what it meant. Someone like that should not be hidden in a place like this. Or maybe the world was just more unfair than he had allowed himself to believe until now. Later, when the rush slowed down, he stayed longer than usual. Most of the staff didn't notice him anymore. But she did, she always did. Even when she didn't look directly at him, it felt like she was aware of his presence. Her shift finally settled into a quiet moment. She walked past him again, expecting nothing more than silence. But this time, he didn't let it pass. "You're not just doing this for fun," he said. She stopped, not fully turning at first, just a pause, like she was deciding how much of herself she wanted to share with someone who didn't belong in her everyday world. Then she faced him. For pot all one hoferable were for washing. She faced him. "No," she said simply. "It's not fun. It's necessary." That answer carried more weight than he expected. He leaned slightly against the counter, watching her more carefully now. Necessary for what? She looked down for a second, like she was organizing thoughts she rarely spoke out loud. "For options," she said, "for a way out, for proving I'm not limited to this uniform." Forrestein to Muirping, the word limited stayed in the air longer than it should have. He studied her expression. There was no complaint in her voice, no anger, just clarity shaped by experience. The kind of clarity people don't gain from comfort. "How long have you been coding?" he asked. "On and off since I was a teenager," she replied. "Mostly on borrowed time, borrowed devices, borrowed internet, whatever I could manage." He nodded slowly, absorbing that. For someone running company, he suddenly felt like he was listening to a story that had been happening in a world he never entered. "And you learned all this by yourself?" he asked. She gave a small shrug. "No one really waited for me to have a proper setup." There was something in the way she said it that didn't ask for sympathy. It simply stated reality. A group of staff passed behind them, laughing about something unrelated. Life in the kitchen continued normally, but between them, a completely different conversation was unfolding quietly. Billionaire glanced at her laptop, now closed and resting beside the counter. "Colful bulls or war why? What happens if this doesn't work out?" he asked. She didn't hesitate this time. "Then I keep working," she said. "That's what I've always done." That answer should have sounded ordinary, but it didn't. Because it wasn't resignation, it was endurance. He pushed himself off the counter slightly. "You realize most people with your skill set don't end up here by choice." A faint, almost tired smile appeared on her face. "Most people don't get to choose their starting point." That sentence landed harder than anything else she had said so far. For a moment, he didn't respond, because he had nothing to say, but because every response he could think of felt too small. Instead, he did something unexpected. He asked, "What would you do if you actually had access proper resources? Time, no distractions." She looked at him for a longer moment than before, not suspicious now, just thoughtful. "I'd build something that solves real problems," she said. "Not just apps, systems, tools that actually change how people get opportunities." There it was again. Not ambition for recognition, ambition for impact. The kitchen manager called out her name from across the room, breaking the moment. She turned slightly, acknowledging it. Her shift wasn't over yet. Before she walked away, she looked back once. "Should get back to work," she said. But this time, as she turned, the billionaire didn't just watch her leave. He started thinking about something he hadn't considered in a long time. Not what she was doing in his kitchen, but what she could do outside of it, if someone finally stopped walking past her potential. The next evening, the kitchen felt the same on the surface. Loud, fast, crowded, but something underneath it had changed. Billionaire didn't come as a visitor anymore. He came as someone who was paying attention to details others had learned to ignore. And for the first time, he wasn't just observing the environment. He was waiting for her. She arrived on time, as always, tying her apron with the same calm rhythm, greeting colleagues who barely noticed anything different about her routine. But she noticed him immediately. He wasn't standing where he usually stood. He was closer than before, not in a way that interrupted, but in a way that suggested he had decided to stay longer than usual. She didn't react. She simply began her shift. But he didn't leave. Hours passed, orders came and went. The kitchen stayed in motion, and still he remained there, watching not her work as a waitress, but the small pauses in between, the moments when she wasn't serving anyone, when she was thinking, calculating, planning something far beyond the environment she was in. At one point, during a brief lull, she finally approached him. "Still here," she said, not surprised, just acknowledging it. He nodded once. A short silence followed. Not uncomfortable, just unfamiliar. Then he said, "I want to show you something." She didn't answer immediately. Her instincts waited. People didn't usually say things like that without intention, but she followed him anyway. Outside the kitchen, past the noise and heat, he led her into a quieter space in the building. Small office area, minimal, clean, far removed from the chaos she was used to. On the table was a laptop already open, displaying a simple interface, but the structure beneath it was anything but simple. "This is a prototype team I've been funding quietly," he said. "We test ideas, early-stage systems, tools that could become something bigger if they survive long enough." She stood still, looking at the screen, not touching it yet. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked. He turned slightly toward her. "Because what you're building in a kitchen doesn't belong in a kitchen." That sentence hung in the air longer than expected. She finally stepped closer, scanning the code. Her expression changed, not dramatically, but enough for someone who was watching closely to notice. Recognition. This structure is unstable, she said almost immediately. He raised an eyebrow slightly. You can tell that quickly? It will fail under load, she continued. The logic is too nkot portion arm offerukable, she continued. The logic is too layered in the wrong places. There was no hesitation in her tone, no guessing, just certainty built from experience he was only beginning to understand. He didn't respond right away, he just watched her more carefully now. You wouldn't sir fix it? He asked. You would fix it? He asked. She looked at him for a moment, then back at the screen. Yes, but not like this. It needs to be rebuilt from the core. A faint smile appeared on his face, not of amusement, but confirmation. Then rebuild it, he said. She turned sharply toward him. I'm still working shifts, I know, he replied. That's why I didn't ask you to quit. That response made her pause. He continued, I'm offering you something different. Not a job, not charity. Access, tools, a real environment, and the chance to build what you keep describing. She looked at him carefully now, trying to understand the angle, the intention, the risk behind the offer. And what do you get from this? She asked. For the first time, he didn't answer like a businessman. Get to stop ignoring something I should have seen a long time ago, he said. Silence returned, but it wasn't empty. It was full of decisions forming slowly. She looked back at the screen again, then at her own reflection, faintly visible in the dark edge of the laptop. A waitress in a borrowed uniform standing in a place she never expected to be invited into. Doesn't change my situation overnight, she said finally. I'm not asking it to, he replied. Another pause. Then she said, if I do this, I do it my way. He nodded immediately. That's the only way it works. Something in that agreement shifted the weight of the moment. Later that night, she returned to the kitchen, but something was different in the way she moved. Not visible to others, but noticeable in how she held herself. The billionaire didn't follow her this time. Didn't need to, because for the first time he wasn't just watching someone survive. He was watching someone step closer to a space where survival was no longer the goal. And the room she had once coded in between shifts was no longer the limit of her story.